Hey there. As we head into the holiday season, I thought I would take a moment to record a mini-sode, bringing soulful speaking off the stage and into our lives. I've mentioned this a few times before here on Soulful Speaking that who we are and the challenges we face on a stage show signs and symptoms in the rest of our lives and vice versa. 10 years ago now, back in 2014, I asked everybody on my email list to do a holiday challenge, noticing habits with family around the holidays and to explore making changes through the then version of soulful speaking and the vocal presence path. In the spirit of walking my talk, I decided to experiment and play around right along with them. And I was surprised and grateful for what I found. My heart feels warm and full of love in this moment and every time I think back on it. That year, as I did every year back then, I spent the holidays with my mother at her home in Arizona. She loved coffee. We both had a love for coffee. I'm on half calf now. And by that point, we loved to have deep conversations over coffee. She was one of my best friends by that point in my adult life. My mom was also hearing impaired. Her hearing loss had started many, many years earlier and seemed to get a little bit worse every year when I would come home for the holidays. And while she did have hearing aids that were supposed to help, they caused other problems for her, so she hardly wore them. For one thing, they made high-pitched sounds piercing and unbearable. And I imagine that when a high-pitched sound came on suddenly and surprised her, it probably felt a lot like being suddenly stabbed in the ear. On top of her hearing issues and those problems and hardly wearing the hearing aids, bright lights at night had also started to bother my mom's eyes. She liked to have faint lights in the background, but nothing directly overhead, which, of course, made it harder for her to read lips, which was how she was navigating without people knowing quite how bad it was getting. And as I'm thinking about it now, I'm realizing my husband loves to have the faint lights in the background or on the sides, but nothing jarring overhead. So this experience in 2014 is liable to help me as my husband and I grow older together as well. Now, before that year, where I decided to take on a soulful speaking challenge for the holidays, when my mother couldn't hear me, I would strain and push to be louder. I would jut my chin out and over enunciate like crazy. You know, it's a lot like yelling at somebody whose first language is not the one you're speaking to them in and not your first language. It was all laced with the frustration in the background for me of not being heard and having to repeat myself. Maybe you know how that goes. If we've got some issues around being heard and being understood, being seen, that can come up at weird times that often has absolutely nothing to do with the person in front of us and really not with that moment in time that we're in. Those triggering things can come up with someone who doesn't wear their hearing aids. It can come up with a coworker. It can come up when we're on a stage. It can suddenly make us work harder or think we need to be louder or we need to earn people's attention or we need to push or force. It was absolutely the root of my deranged mannequin, of my passion meeting not enoughness, and working so hard that I repelled people that I was trying to attract on a stage or trying to connect with in my life. It's funny and a little sad when I look back on it now in a humbling way, especially after having experienced what was possible that holiday season. That year, because I decided to take on my own soulful speaking challenge, when she couldn't hear me, instead of straining and forcing, took it as an opportunity to play, just like I'd asked everybody on my list to do. First, I set an intention and I connected with what was really important to me in those moments. The reason I was traveling home every holiday season: connection and love. So instead of sending frustration and pushing and controlling and struggle at her, I embodied connection and love and allowed the breath to carry that to her across the room. I was inviting her to join me in that, looking for signs of that intention coming to life more in her. I even did this when I was asking her silly questions about Downton Abbey. Then I opened my heart to receive her as she was in that moment, while sending myself out through my heart. Looking back, that's pretty important to why things felt so juicy. Receiving her as she was. That meant accepting that she doesn't hear the same way everybody else does in that moment, rather than being frustrated by it and allowing that frustration to push me into habits of my deranged mannequin force and control mode. Finally, I tried breathing life into the experience by taking a nice, healthy, nourishing breath. I opened my throat and I supported the sound with my core muscles and all that air instead of straining with my throat. Because straining in our throats, and I know this and had to consciously do it myself, straining in our throats makes us sometimes sound louder to ourselves in our inner ear without actually increasing the volume for the rest of the room. And it's bad for our voices. Whenever I did that, my volume got a little louder. And what I noticed more was a real change in the clarity of my voice coming out. It was if my commitment to really communicate from my heart to her changed the sound being sent across the room and made it more crystal clear. Basically, I was practicing intend, align, invite. So, what did I notice happening in my mother, the signs of love and connection, and between us? Well, all of a sudden, whenever I repeated myself, she could hear me 95% of the time. With a few simple yet powerful adjustments, she could hear me when at roughly the same volume just moments before, she could not. I believe she could hear my heart. That was the last holiday we got to spend together before she passed away. And I am so grateful that I had all the years that I had with her, and deeply grateful for that last one because it was so rich and so full of connection and love. I've rolled this over in my heart for a decade. Hearing and connection can come in all shapes and sizes. I've seen it time and again, from those interactions with my mother and the 6 months that followed before she passed, to workshop and program participants who speak different native languages. When we really meet people with an open heart, accept them as they are, and communicate while embodying our values, we can literally and figuratively hear each other better than when we don't. Sit with that for a moment. And I'll say it again. When we really meet people with an open heart, accept them as they are, and communicate while living our own values, we can hear each other better than when we don't. What might be possible in the world from there? And since I started with a holiday season kind of challenge, What might be possible in your family for the rest of this year from there? Try this during the holiday season for the rest of the year. Set an intention to honor what's important to you and invite the people in your world to join you in that, under, between, and through your words. Open your heart. Breathe. And let me know how it goes. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can comment below. If you're listening to the audio version, go ahead and go to my website, voice-matters.com, and scroll down to the Instagram or the LinkedIn, or send me a message directly through their website. I would really love to hear these things. I absolutely love hearing these stories. Have a beautiful, connected, and love-filled holiday season, and I will be back soon. Bye-bye.